Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. Here, streaming live on YouTube, live on Twitter. I apologize for the state of everything. My voice, the way things might look. I'm not 100% sure exactly what's going on right now in the world because I am coming to you from the future. It is John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. I am out here in Sydney, Australia, where currently it is, what time is it? It is 8:04 on Thursday, October 6th. And Ibby, I don't think that is what time it is back in New Jersey on the East Coast.
No, it is not, John. It's 5:05 p.m. Wednesday. So greetings to you from the future. I should say greetings to you from the past. So hopefully all things are going well for you over there. Hopefully your trip's going well and everything's going the way you want it to be. There's been a lot of shit going on with our team. We haven't recorded in 2 weeks because of again, schedules and things just not working out the way we wanted it to. So we had to push some things and, a lot went on. We'll figure out how we want to go about talking about it, how we want to, address certain things. And I'm sure we'll cover all of it, but it was an interesting 2 weeks to say the least. And I know I joked about it on Twitter yesterday with you. And, I said that you were more than willing to dive into the mud and get into all that muck and mix up with some people. And me, on the other hand, I kind of dipped away for a little bit because I couldn't take the infighting. I couldn't take all of it, but I was still following along with the stuff that you were putting to make sure, that I didn't have to hop in and save you. I had to check, but there was a lot of things said from you. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts as well. There was a lot of things said from other people too. And we'll get into all of it. So where exactly do you want to start today?
Well, I do want to start right there. And of course, we're live on Twitter. We're live on YouTube, as we are every time we record this. But you can listen to the audio version of this podcast starting tomorrow, courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. Let's not forget about that. And, and right on cue, Stevie Mac jumping in the comments saying, well, look who's back. Yes, Stevie, if you're just tuning in, it is 15 hours ahead. It is 8:07 or whatever on Thursday morning here in Sydney, Australia, which is where I still am. So no one can ever question my commitment to the Mets, nor my commitment to this podcast, as has been questioned on Twitter over the last few days. People have told me, Ibby, that I've been too positive and that my positivity is hurting the fan base. And to those people, I say, fuck off, because it is 8 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go downstairs and get a cup of hotel coffee so that we can record this podcast. So if you want to question my commitment to this team, somebody told me I don't live and die by every loss because I'm taking it in stride. Dude, I've got my iPad pulled up with a fucking weather delay alert from MLB.TV while we record so I can watch the last meaningless game of the season with Tyler Naquin leading off and Terrence Gore playing center field. So don't ever tell me that I do not commit to this team and live and die by all of it. Anyway, that being said, where do I want to start? I want to start right there, man. I want to know what your thoughts are now that everything is sewn up. Now that the Mets are going to be the wild card. They lost out on the division. It was hard fought. Obviously the series in Atlanta did not go the Mets' way. And you and I have been positive through this entire thing. We said, hey, just keep your head down. Just keep focusing. The Mets are right there. The Mets are still in it. The Mets are still doing what they need to do. They're taking care of business. And look, even through some tough losses with the Cubs, with the Nats, with the Marlins, not being able to sweep certain series and things like that, the Mets stayed where they needed to stay. And they went into Atlanta with everything ahead of them. When we recorded 2 weeks ago, I said if the Mets were 2.5 games up heading into that series, I would have been happy. They were just short of that, and they wound up basically losing the division by getting swept in Atlanta. So where's your mindset now going into the playoffs? We're playing on Friday. It's it's a totally different thing than what we expected, but I still am not feeling shaken up by this. So where are you at?
I was trying to find out where my words were going to go with this. And I've said this multiple times on the show. I said that I'm happy that we are a weekly podcast because in that moment sometimes you can be a little bit reactionary after you watch a game, and you can say things that maybe are a little out of place, or thoughts that are a little out of place. But when you let things simmer, you let things come down a little bit, and then get that perspective back, it kind of puts you in the right mindset of what you want to say. So I feel like I finally reached that point where I know what I want to say. And I kind of alluded to it last night in a tweet, which was quote tweeted by Lori Rubinson, who was kind of against with what I said to an extent, not like totally against it, but I understand where she was coming from. And my thought process was that with everything that's gone on, there's nothing that we can do now. It's basically there. I don't understand like the infighting thing I mentioned before, everyone attacking each other, saying all these things. Oh, what are you happy about? Stop this. The 100 wins doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. You lost the division. All this nonsense being said. It's like, it's done. Does it suck that they didn't win a division? Sure. Did I think that that September would have gone a little bit better? Sure. Is this the end of the road? No, it's not. There's still games to be played. Everyone goes back to zero on Friday. And that's where my mindset is at the moment, because there's no point in me looking back on the Brave series. Okay. If I want to say things in short, I'll say it right now. That was the most inopportune time to have the worst display of Met baseball this season. That's what it was, the worst time to have the worst showing that I've seen from this team all season. Now people can say, well, they blew it because of the DeGrom game. Sure, against the A's. They can say, well, if you beat the Cubs, you're not in the spot. I can also look, if people want to play revisionist history, we can go along the same lines the opposite way and say there was a lot of games that the Mets had no business winning this year either, and they did. They had no business winning that Philly game when they came back. There was a lot of games that they won.
The Cardinal game.
Or the Cardinal
game. Going back, it's ancient history now, but they won that game because of an error by Nolan Arenado. When was the last time Nolan Arenado? I don't think he's made an error since, and I don't think he's ever made an error before that. He won like 4 Gold Gloves in a row. Like, so you want to talk about not being able to win games or winning games that you shouldn't and all that stuff. Yeah, there's going to be plenty of those over the course of 162.
Yeah, and it's again, I understand that people are angry. I'm not trying to tell people that they can't be angry based off of how things finished in Atlanta. That's fine. I was put off too. That was terrible baseball. They were outmatched. They were outclassed in every sense of the word for every single inning, every single out, every single pitch of that 3-game set. I was pumped up going into that series, and I came out of it just worn down and beaten as a fan, because I thought that they would at least get one win, and it didn't happen. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then people, wanting to blame the Marlins last night because they came up short with the pace. So no, the Mets had their chances to get this division, and it didn't happen. We move on. You let it go. And now the Padres are in front of you for a weekend set, 3-game set that you got to win 2. Okay. And that's all that we can do now. That's where my mindset is. I get that people maybe want to wait until Friday. Once that first pitch happens, then maybe they'll lock back in. But for me, I'm over the sadness. I'm over the frustrations of the Brave series. I'm over that stuff. I'm on to what's important, and that is a good San Diego team that's in front of you Friday night at Citi.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you just said. And, it's funny because I joked around a couple of minutes ago about the people calling me toxically positive and how, it's bad for the fan base and how I'm not a real fan because I take it in stride. But, my point was that, this is how ball players act. This is how people on the team act when it comes to, the day in and day out of baseball. It's hard to win Major League Baseball games. Every player on every team cannot go down in the dumps after every single loss all season because they need to keep their head on straight for the next game. So I just try, even though I'm a fan and I'm not a player, I just try to take that mindset with me. I don't know if it's changed ever since I've done a little bit of stuff with the Mets, ever since you and I have interviewed some players, ever since, we've been a little bit closer to it than just a straight up fan. And we are still just fans, right? Like, we don't have MLB credentials. We don't work in the press, so we are just fans still. But I don't know if I've taken that cue a little bit more since I've gotten to know some of these guys. Like I said on the podcast 2 weeks ago, the stuff Todd Frazier said to me after the season wrapped up in 19, you just have to understand that there is a human element to this. And for your own sanity, it doesn't mean that you or I live and die by it any differently. But for your own sanity, you need to be able to exhale a little bit and go, okay, that was brutal. I'm pissed off about it, but I need to understand where this falls. And so that was kind of always my marching order to Mets Twitter. I never told people to not be upset. I never told people to not want to win the division. I never told people to not be mad when the Mets aren't playing good, to not be mad at Buck Showalter if you didn't like his decisions. I never said any of that. What I said was have a little bit of perspective. And that's all I asked people to have right up until the very end. Am I mad the Mets didn't win the division? Absolutely.
Yes.
To your point, am I mad that they played their 3 worst baseball games of the season, arguably, when it mattered the most? Absolutely. Is that a bad harbinger of things to come? Potentially, because they came up small in a really big spot. 2 weeks ago, I said to you that the Mets' advantage are 5 players. It's Diaz, Scherzer, DeGrom, Lindor, and Alonso. Well, you know what? In that Braves series, with the exception of Diaz, who really didn't get opportunities because the Mets were never really in a spot where he could save a game, with the exception of him, all of the 4 other superstars on this team came up small. And if the Mets come up small that way, if Lindor comes up small and he's a great season, and I love Lindor, Alonso, great season, I love him, DeGrom speaks for himself, Scherzer speaks for himself. If those guys come up small, the Mets ain't going to win the World Series. That's the bottom line, just the way they lost to the Braves. So you can be pissed off about all of that. You can be upset about all of that. But to your point, it's all over now. The Mets are going to play a meaningless baseball game today, just like a lot of teams in the league, because everything is sorted. All the playoff positions are locked in. So whether you're going to the postseason or not, you're playing a meaningless baseball game today. And that's it. But the Mets did, Ibby, and this is the last time I'm going to say this because we are going to turn the page and we're going to focus on the postseason. We're going to focus on the future, and we're going to focus on something entirely different. But the Mets won 100 games. And for a fan base that has been through everything that the fan base has been through, right? You cannot poo-poo what 100 games means to this franchise. You cannot throw that aside. You absolutely cannot backtrack on the meaning that in the second year of Steve Cohen's ownership, they won 100 games. In 60 years before, 59 years before this, they won 100 games 3 times. Mm-hmm. And I know today is meaningless baseball, like I just said, but if the Mets win today with their makeshift lineup, they'll win 101 games, and that'll be the second largest win total in franchise history. So no, I'm not happy we didn't win the division. I'm not happy that the Mets came up small in Atlanta. I'm not happy that we have to have this conversation and play the Padres on Friday. I'm not happy about any of that. But it doesn't mean that this team choked. It doesn't mean this team collapsed. It doesn't mean that this team isn't as good as we thought they were a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, at the beginning of the season. This team has the potential to have the 3rd best record in Major League Baseball if they win today. You cannot sit here and tell me that they choked away a division with the 3rd best record in baseball. I will not stand for that rhetoric. I can't. Now, I can be pissed. You're pissed. Everybody's pissed. But to call them choke artists, to say that they collapsed, to say that it reminds them of 2007, you should have some perspective. 2007, they didn't make the playoffs.
Yes.
And I know winning the division is an easier road, quote unquote, because you play one less series, you get the bye, you can set up your starting rotation, you get to go on the easier side of the bracket. I understand all of that. I understand that tangibly. But the Mets have as good a chance statistically as anybody to win the World Series that's in the playoffs. All you can do over an off season, all you can do is try to put yourself in a position where your team can compete over 162 to make the playoffs. Once you get in the playoffs, man, it's a roll of the dice. I've said it on this show. I've said it on Twitter. Nobody can tell me that the Braves were the best team in baseball last year. Nobody can tell me that the Nationals were the best team in baseball in 2019. I go all the way back to 2006. The Mets and the Yankees had tied for the best record in Major League Baseball, 97 wins each. They looked like they were on a collision course to another Subway Series. The Mets lost in the NLCS to a Cardinals team that barely finished over 500 and won a dumpster fire division. The Yankees lost to a 95-win wild card team. Those teams go on to the playoffs. It looks to the World Series, It looks like the Tigers are going to beat the Cardinals. They've got everybody. They're going to be excellent. Look what they just did to the Yankees. And they get their doors blown off by the fucking St. Louis Cardinals, who weren't even that good. So you don't have to be the best team in baseball. You don't. Not to win the World Series. You just have to get in. And this is not me sitting here apologizing for what the Mets did in Atlanta.
Right.
I'm just saying that you have to look at this and go, and you also have to look at it as a Mets fan. We have all been through so much. It has been brutal. And when a team like the Braves goes on a run from June 1st till now, the Mets were on a 98-win pace, not a 68-win pace, not a 78-win pace, not even an 88-win pace, which would be acceptable. 98-win pace. The Braves were on a 114-win pace. That is a team that has come up and taken it from you. Now, am I happy that the Braves came up and took it from the Mets after 100 and some odd days in first place? No. But the Mets did not give it away. The Braves took it. And to me, you could call it semantics. I know there's a lot of comments coming in. I'm going to give you the opportunity to comment on everything, Ibby, and we'll jump into these comments. We're not ignoring anybody. But to me, you cannot hang your head like the Mets did something. Like, the Mets. Somebody tweeted out, and I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Meek Phil or somebody. They said, I'm so happy that LOL Mets of the Steve Cohen era is winning 100 games and making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Sign me up for that every fucking year.
Yeah.
Inject that into my veins because the Mets are playing postseason baseball on Friday.
Yeah. That was a lot to digest. Let me see. Let me see where I want to go.
Sorry, man. I'm jazzed up on. I'm drinking
fine.
Australian espresso. Jazzed
up. It's fine. I'm of the thought process of. You joked before. You just said they're rolling out. If they could somehow win with today's lineup, well, today's lineup is what the lineup used to look like for our New York Mets. And again, I'm not trying to be an apologist. I'm not trying to be that way, but the fact that this team is in year 2 and they're plus, I want to say it's plus 23, maybe it's a little bit more in terms of wins from last year to this year. Obviously, I'd go show you what Buck did for this team as well. It's just you win 100 games and you don't win the division. I know people are joking like that's the most Metsian thing ever. You win 100 games, but you can't win the division. And it's like, look, the Braves were better in every sense of the word. And what I mean by that is, to your point, the run that they've went on, where they went like 77 and 33 or whatever the hell it was, it's unheard of. And to throw it to what AJ Minter said last night, it's like, look, Minter said it best. He goes, he could have, as a Brave, he could have said, yeah, the Mets choked it away and we came up, and he's like, no, Mets didn't choke it away. We came up, we took it from them. And that's 100% true. They did. They played better in September than the Mets. It happened. And the Mets, all they had to do was win one game. And they couldn't do it. And that just comes down to the fact that they had their chances and it didn't happen. So I'm not going to continuously sit here and cry about it because it doesn't solve anything, which is why I don't understand why people are constantly fighting with each other about this entire thing. It's like, you're in the playoffs. I said this 2 weeks ago. The mood would be 1,000% different from both of us if we were having this conversation and the Braves took the division and the Mets were out. Like if the only avenue that the Mets had to get in was to win a division and they lost it the way they did, then it would be a failure because they did not get
Absolutely.
into the playoffs. Then it's a 1,000% a failure. But I cannot sit here and say that a team failed or is a failure when they win 101 games, when they win 100 games, potentially 101 games, and the other team played otherworldly to take it from them. They had their chances. I'm not saying that they didn't. They could have played a lot better in September. They could have, and they didn't. And that's why they are where they are. But still, they are in the playoffs, and they do have a shot at a championship. I hate the fact that people automatically are saying that they're done. It doesn't matter, as if the only way that this team had a shot of winning games in the playoffs was to win the division. We can no longer say easy road. I've been like, I have to call myself out too. I've been saying on some tweets, on some things on the Facebook group, like tougher road now. It's like, no, the entire playoffs is a tough road. People make this.
Yeah.
People make the playoffs for a reason. We can no longer say, especially after the September that we watched, we can no longer say easy road, tough road, doesn't matter. Okay. Mets had an easier road than the Braves, and the Braves handled their business and the Mets couldn't. So you're in the dance. You have to play to steal a Herb Edwards. You're playing to win the game now. Like, that's it. You have to go out there.
Don't bring up my Jets.
I'm sorry. But you got to go out there and you got to play the games. Do I think we'll talk about the San Diego series in a little bit. Do I think it would have been awesome to have that bye to set things up? 1,000%. I'm not saying I didn't want that. I did want that. I thought we were going to have that, but it didn't happen. I'm over it. I got my time to decompress. I got my anger out. I was pissed off. I was down, whatever, but I wasn't jumping down people's throats like a lot of people were. I was not claiming fandom over somebody else like a lot of people were. Not doing that. It's on to Friday. You support the team. We're ready to go. 100+ wins. Friday night, Citi Field, playoff baseball, the high that I've been chasing since 2015. I don't have to worry about 2016, that fucking buy-in game or whatever it was called, and losing the game to whatever the hell his name was, Connor something, whatever. I don't have to worry about that. It's a 3-game set, and I'm going to watch my team in the playoffs, which is what I've been wanting for the longest time, and now I get to have it. And now it's on this team to wake up, keep the bats rolling. Hopefully the pitching is a little bit better, and we can roll on and see what happens in the dance. We have a ticket. We are in. Now it's time for the fun to start.
Absolutely. Look, this is Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on Twitter. We're live on YouTube. We got a ton of comments coming in. I'm going to jump back into them right here, right now. Of course, this is the best way building characters since 1962. I think you can still get that off our website.
If anyone was curious, that's what it says.
This is the best way for you guys to interact with the show. And of course, you can listen to the podcast version of this starting tomorrow on Spotify, Apple, all of those places and more. And for everybody who's just jumping in, the reason why Ibby and I are saying, hey, put this to bed, let's move on from this, but still talking about it, is because we needed to wrap this up for ourselves and we needed to wrap this up for our listeners. If you guys joined in a little bit late and maybe you missed the beginning, the crux of what we're getting at, it's time to put all of that aside. And I would like to say to everybody who watches and everybody who listens, I know I'm a prick sometimes. I know I'm a real opinionated bastard on Twitter, okay? But here's the difference. I'll say it on Twitter. I'll say it on this show. I'll say it to your faces. I don't care. I'm not hiding behind some avatar. My name is my name. It's attached to everything. I'm going to get stuff wrong. I'm going to get stuff right. And to me, this thing that we're talking about right now, and I'll admit when I'm wrong. I admitted I was wrong about not wanting Buck Showalter. I admitted on this show I was wrong about something that I didn't even have to cop to because it was years before the show ever started. I admitted that I was wrong about Brandon Nimmo because I always thought that Brandon Nimmo would be a 4th outfielder for his career. And look what Brandon Nimmo has turned into. Okay? But I get a lot of stuff right, too. So do you. How good were our predictions at the start of the season? We both had Alonso hitting 40+. I had Alonso leading the league in RBIs. You had Cookie Carrasco getting to 15 wins. Yeah, I had Lindor finishing in the top 10 in the MVP vote. He's probably going to do that. So we get stuff right, we get stuff wrong. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make right now is I know it boils down to semantics sometimes, but I just think as Mets fans, and that's what we all are, as Mets fans, we need to do a little bit better in understanding and recognizing that things have changed and things will continue to change because this is not the Wilpons. You made a great comment, Ibby, about you look at the Mets makeshift lineup today in game 162 that doesn't matter for the standings. And you look at that lineup and how often is that lineup what the Mets were rolling out in a game that actually mattered. You know, you've got Naquin leading off. You've got Vientos hitting sixth, playing third base. You know, and I know some of these guys are prospects and stuff. That's cool. I want to see Vientos play third. I want to Alvarez catch. Sure. But how many times did we have to deal with Eric Campbell hitting fourth and John Mayberry Jr. hitting fourth? All of those days are gone. So win, lose, or draw, and I'm not trying to say the Mets can't win or nothing like that. But no matter what happens, the Mets are different now. And Stevie Mack says it. He said, I'm trying to have some positivity where all of this, it makes Uncle Stevie want to spend even more money in the offseason. That's the thing, guys. Whether the Mets win the World Series or not, I'll tell you who the Mets are in play for. Aaron Judge, if they want to try to trade for Shohei Ohtani, they can. You know, if the Mets want to go out, I don't know who else is another big free agent out there, whatever, but you can go out and get whomever you want. It doesn't matter. It's Steve Cohen now. It's Steve Cohen. You know, we're talking about Brandon Nimmo. I love Brandon Nimmo. The Mets should try to re-sign Brandon Nimmo unless they're going to sign Aaron Judge. And we can talk about that, and it's not a pipe dream. It's not made up. It's not fabricated. It's not bullshit. It's very, very possible because Steve Cohen owns them. So whether they win the World Series, lose the World Series, get swept in the first round, lose in game 7 of the CS, it doesn't matter. You've got an own, nothing doesn't matter. Excuse me. The owner and what's here in front of us is something so different than we have ever had. And I know that we've all been hurt before, and it's hard to get over that hurt. But I've said it a million times, sports are fickle. Lori Rubinson said it when she was on this show. If you're not going to enjoy the ups, there's no point. Go watch something else. Go do something else. Because if you're not going to enjoy, this is the ups. It was a bad month. It was a bad season, way to end the season with the Braves series. Yeah, it was a bad series. But these are the good times. 100 wins in the playoffs is a good time. Third best record in baseball is a good time. You don't see the Dodgers apologizing for making the wild card last year when they couldn't beat the San Francisco Giants, who had a platoon at every position, and it worked to perfection. Sometimes that's baseball, Susan. So anyway, let me just jump into these comments. There's a million coming in. Thank you guys so much for doing it. David said a little while ago, hey guys, good job. John doing this in Australia. I'll be in Japan 3 weeks from now. Be up in the middle of the night, early morning, should the Mets get that far. I know what it's like, man. It's going to be real weird. I'm kind of happy this game today doesn't mean anything because I can take a little bit of a pause, but I'm up doing the podcast anyway. But, you know, this weekend for the big series, it's going to be a little different. He also said, you can't ask Miami to do your work. My mindset was already towards San Diego once the Braves series was over. That's the reality. That's fair. Carlos Ramos saying, what's up, everyone? So this is the let me backtrack and hit that unsend tweet day. I don't know about that. I'm you know, we stand on everything. You know what I mean? Like I said, I'm not backtracking anything I said. It just is what it is.
If I could just come in real quick. And
Go.
This is towards Carlos, because I know you guys had a little bit of fun last night when it came to Wilpon comments, and then you posted a picture of Fred Wilpon and all that stuff.
Me and Fred
hanging out in the S&Y box. I wanted to just let it be known. And Carlos, you can gladly check you can go onto my Twitter. You can hit the little what's it called? Magnifying glass at the top for the search, and you can type in under my page. You can type in whatever word you want. You can type in Wilpon. You can type in Jeff Wilpon. You can type in Jeff. You can type in Fred. You can type in Fred Wilpon. You could put in Sandy's handle, and you can find every single tweet that I have put over the years criticizing, calling out, ripping them to shreds. So I never, ever want to be accused or lumped in as this apologist and being compared to the Wilpons, because I will not fucking stand for that. I for years I screamed into the void of Twitter before when I had like 100 followers and no one knew who the frick I was. People still don't know who I am, but I have a little more people follow me now. But the point is, I always called the team out, whether it was ownership, whether it was management, whether it was players. I always called people out, and I was always real, and I continue to be real. It's just when I saw that, it really got under my skin. So I had to make sure I got that out there.
Listen, same. You guys can't go back and check my old tweets because sometimes I have a thing delete all my old tweets, and it's basically because sometimes if you think I get fired up about the Mets, you should see how I felt about some political figures in our country recently. So I needed to delete some of that stuff just for, just in case. Anyway, but I took the Wilpons to task. I used to take the Mets to task. And the only reason why I took that picture was because if you get a chance to get on the field and the owner of the team walks by,
I would have punched him in the fucking face, John. I would have punched him in the face.
I want to be clear about one thing, though. I would have not taken a picture with Jeff Wilpon. I would have been like, "Fuck you" to Jeff Wilpon. I don't know. I don't like Fred Wilpon. Like I don't know why we're talking about this, but whatever. I don't like Fred Wilpon, but my ire, the source of my ire was always more towards Jeff. Because I always felt like he was the more inept. Like Fred was like, take the team, take it. You do it. And it was like, no, don't give him this. Don't give him this. He is so incapable. You're barely capable. He is so incapable. I can tell from a million miles away. But I also have pictures with like Omar Minaya from that day, and some other folks. Dude, I have a picture of J.D. Davis, and you know how I feel about J.D. Davis. You get on the field and you take some pictures of people. I have a picture of Robinson Cano. It is what it is, man. Yeah. Let me jump back in here. Let's see. Carlos does say, "Let's go, Stevie Mac," to the response that Uncle Stevie will, kind of go all in and do what he's got to do. And then Stevie says, the playoff role will definitely prove whether the Mets are battle tested or not. I mean, that's ultimately what you're really looking at.
Yeah,
and then David says the division wasn't lost in the Atlanta series. The division was lost at home to the Cubs and the Nats when they lost 2 of 3. Moot point now, move on to San Diego. I think all of that stuff is entirely fair. And then just Stevie said, for anybody watching, the game's supposed to start at 6 now, 6 local time. I guess it's raining there in New York. So, keep that in mind. And then Aram jumping in a little bit ago, a couple minutes ago, says, "Sup, fellas? Sup, Aram?"
Sup, Aram?
And then Carlos says, "This is with John, not you, Ibby. I never had any issues with you." Carlos, it's all love. I appreciate you still being here and do it and, interacting on the show and watching the show and listening. We can disagree. And also, I just want to be clear. I never called you soft. He took me to task because he was like, "Don't call me soft."
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Soft. A lot of people are soft. I never said you're soft. But a lot of people are too soft for this thing. You can tell. There's a lot of people that are not ready for what playoff baseball looks like. And it's because they're Mets fans like we are, and they don't know what playoff baseball is supposed to feel like. Playoff baseball is supposed to give you anxiety. That's why I get pissed off, Ibby, when I see the Evan Roberts of the world. And I like Evan. Evan is as knowledgeable as they come in terms of knowing baseball and knowing history. Yes. And I got a lot of respect for Evan. But when I see Evan do things like, I don't know if I can handle this anxiety. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Oh my God. Oh, my heart's being ripped out. Just chill out. This is playoff baseball. And I know a lot of people don't like Craig Carton, and I understand why some people don't. But Craig's like, dude, this is fun. This is what you're supposed to sign up for. You want you know what I mean? Like, yes, you want a team. I would love the Mets to win every game because they're the Mets. I would love them to win every game in the playoffs, 10-0. And just do it in a laugh and laugh our way to the World Series, because I think Met fans are owed something like that. But you know what? You do kind of live for these great games that are 2-1, where every pitch matters, and like that's baseball.
You hang on every single pitch. Playoff baseball is hanging on every single pitch. That's why it's like I said, I cannot even describe the feelings that I felt in 15, hanging on every pitch, being with my buddies, watching the games at the same place every single time, and just you're so enveloped in a base hit here, a double here, a homer here, just all that entire feeling. I've been wanting that for so long, and now I get a shot at getting it again. It's like this, like you said, these are the good times. Look, we know what happened. It's in the past. We're moving on. The biggest thing, it is a new slate come Friday. everyone's 0-0. That's it. It's a road to 13 wins. That's what you're going for. And that's it. Like, forget everything else. It's in the past. You're moving forward. Win the games in front of you. Obviously, you want to take it one series at a time, but the ultimate goal is to win those 13 total games.
Exactly. And, it's funny that you said that because that's how I explained it. I had an ex-girlfriend that was a sports fan but not a baseball fan, and she always said baseball's boring. Baseball's boring.
She's boring.
And, well, at least she wasn't a Yankee fan that I had to try to, like, convert, or, like, a Phillies fan or something like that, because you never date within the division. No. But she wasn't a baseball fan, and she's like, I think baseball's a little slow and it's a little boring. And, this goes back to the Mets run in 06. It's a while ago. And, so I remember saying to her, like, it's not boring if you understand that so much goes into every single pitch. And when a team's in the playoffs, you can really get a sense of that, because every pitch matters. Every decision matters, because games are won and lost on one swing, one bad pitch, one at bat, one error, whatever. And, we came out of that postseason run, and it was like, oh, wow. Okay, I get it now. Because that's what it is. Yeah. And that's what playoff baseball is supposed to feel like. And that's what this playoff, run for the Mets hopefully will feel like for all of us. We're so wildly invested in each and every single moment that, good, bad, or indifferent, we're going to be there with our friggin' heart beating out of our chest. Yeah. James Dowling says, people need to remember we have Steve Cohen now as an owner, and look how good the Dodgers have been, and yet how many rings they have. That's a great point. Goes back to what I was saying before, where you can't say the Braves were the best team last year. You can't say the Nationals were the best team in 19 and all of that. And then Carlos says, I cannot describe watching my favorite player ever take a Wainwright hook and not swing in 06. I'm still here cheering, getting pissed off, Met fan for life. Yeah, I was catatonic when Beltran took that strike. But
I walked out of the stadium. I was there. I was there. I'm telling you, shape behind home plate. I was there.
I will never forget. I was sitting I was at my aunt's house. I was sitting at her like living room TV. It happened, and I just sat there like, just like that for 15 minutes, because I was shocked, because everything that team had done all season long showed me that they were going to come back. They were the comeback kings. They were one of the best teams in baseball. They always had an answer. They always had a punch. They always, especially offensively, that pitching staff was pitched over its head, with Ali Perez and John Maine and all that stuff. But they were there. Like, that offense was legitimate, and Beltran had an unbelievable year, and you just thought he was going to come through, but obviously he didn't. We're not going to talk about that. Look, Ibby, we've been talking about turning the page. So I think what we should do is take our quick break now, come back, turn the page fully. We're not talking about Mets Twitter. We're not talking about division. We're not talking about 100 wins. All of that is in the past. We are talking about the playoffs and forward. We'll do that after the break. It's John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Tilt Mets Do Us Part. 10-second break, and we'll be right back, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are right back here. Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate the comments coming in. John Sapanaro out here in Sydney, Australia this week. Matt Ibby Ibanez back in New Jersey. Ibby, I do want to say before we talk about the playoffs, I fed a kangaroo from my hand the other day, and then last night I ate a kangaroo. So I just want to be honest that I am doing my part in the circle of life here in Australia. Kangaroo was it was fine. I wouldn't rush out to have it again, but I am happy that I had it. So
could you compare it to a taste of something else? I'm just curious what kangaroo tastes like. Does it comp to anything? Is it like chicken?
Well, no, so it's a red meat, so it's more like beef in that sense. Like it's a red meat, but it's also, kangaroos have very little body fat. So it's what a lot of people would say it's tough. And it kind of is. Some cuts I noticed were a little bit chewier than others. Some were, very reminiscent of steak. It tasted fine. The texture is a little bit like you kind of really have to cut at it because they are so muscular. When I was in Iceland a few years ago, I ate horse as well, and I would say it's very similar. I would say it's very similar to horse in that it's another very muscular animal, that you can really mess up cooking it if you overcook it like by 2 seconds.
Right.
It'll be like completely inedible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was fine. I don't know. I do that. I don't eat bugs. Like I'm very anti-eating like a weird, like I don't want to eat like a tarantula on a stick that's deep fried. I'm not doing that. But if it's like a meat, I will try
give it a try.
So like whatever's local. Like I've had alligator and rattlesnake and all kind yak. I eat yak in Alaska. I will try it. So I'm happy I tried kangaroo. If you come out to Australia, you probably should. There's plenty of them, by the way. It's not like it's an endangered species. I'm not a monster, okay? Same thing with Iceland. They raise horses for food out there, so I'm not some kind of awful person. I will say I did like horse a little bit better than I like kangaroo. I would not rush out and have it again. But if you ever come out to Australia, you should probably try it because, why the hell not? It's the only place in the world where you can actually do that. All of that being said, Ibby, all seriousness, back to our Mets, back to the playoffs. Before we talk about the playoffs, I want to just bring up the fact that the Mets showed a lot of guts when they called up Francisco Alvarez.
Yes.
They probably should have called him up a bit sooner, but they know that they had a need, and they addressed it by calling him up for the biggest series of the year. You could argue whether or not maybe calling him up a couple weeks sooner, allowing him to get his feet wet would have been the move. I probably would have done that in hindsight, but it's not as though they didn't call up somebody to try to fill that role in Mark Vientos. I think they saw Vientos as somebody who was a little further along and somebody that would fill that DH role immediately. And so, I think everything, no decision is in a vacuum. But Alvarez is here. His first major league hit is a home run, absolute bomb off of a curveball where, look, I know the Nationals aren't good, but Edwards Jr. is a decent pitcher. He's having a good year. And I believe the slugging percentage on the curveball that he throws was like 375 all season. And Alvarez hit it out to the
it wasn't a hanger
like 108.
Either.
No,
it wasn't
a
hanger.
Readjusted.
Yeah,
he readjusted for the curveball, kept his weight back, hit it 400 and some odd feet with a 108 mile an hour exit velocity, and then he ropes a double, has the two hardest hits of the game. So congratulations to him. Very clear he's the future. I would say it's very clear heading into the offseason that James McCann days are numbered as a New York Met. I think you're going to see a catching tandem of Tomas Nido and Francisco Alvarez next year. But that said, your thoughts on Alvarez, and more importantly, small sample size, would you put Alvarez on the playoff roster?
When it comes to what I've seen so far, I agree with you. There's one thing that we've noticed about Alvarez throughout the year in the minors. It's that every time he moved up to another level, it took him a couple weeks to like really truly readjust. And then he would go on these tears, and that's how he really stacked up his numbers. And then he moved on to the next level, and then it'd be a little of a learning curve, and then he would dominate, and then just so on and so forth. So yeah, I think if he was called up a little bit earlier, it would have done him better justice as opposed to just throwing him into the toughest series of the season. But to answer your question when it comes to what I think of him on the playoff roster, and this was a talking point amongst a lot of Mets fans today at work, and that's, for me, 100% he's on the roster. And the reason I'm saying that is because, if I'm being honest, he offers something that a lot of people on this team outside of Pete Alonso don't offer, and that is legit power, and that's difference-making, home run ability, to where in a game sometimes, and is it fair to tell a 20-year-old kid to go up there and hit a home run? No, it's not, but he still has the talent where he can do it. When you're the number one prospect, obviously, that, you're capable of doing something like that. But for me, I honestly feel that even in a short series like this, a 3-game set with San Diego, I'm looking at it and going, if we're being true, if we're being honest with one another, Tomas Nido should be playing every day. Okay, James McCann should not be on this roster right now. He shouldn't be here. And my friend of the show, TJ, he usually hops into the comments sometimes. He mentioned today that with the lineup that it was posted, he saw that McCann was at first base. Oh, great! Now they're gonna put McCann on the roster because he's gonna be the backup first baseman now instead of the catcher, just to get him on there. But it's like, McCann shouldn't be here. And if you're going to ask me, would I rather have Alvarez or Vientos on the roster, I'm going to say Alvarez. And that's not me just saying based off of the home run last night either. And I know a lot of people are going to think, oh, it's one lucky home run or it's one lucky double. Doesn't mean you should be. It's like, no, I've seen enough from this kid that I can say the presence at the plate, and I watch him, and I'm watching the at-bats with him because I'm very curious, and I'm seeing how he tracks the ball. And sometimes he's swinging out of his shoes, but I'm seeing how he tracks the ball and how it's coming in. Even when he was struggling in Atlanta, I'm watching it, and then I compare it to someone like Mark Vientos, and I say, I think that Alvarez is more ready for this moment than a Mark Vientos. So if you're going to ask me, you can only have one of those guys on the roster, I'm picking Alvarez. So either way, based off of what he provides alone as a power hitter, especially against the lefty, and you'll see one in Blake Snell, I think Francisco Alvarez should be on this roster.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Before that, I want to jump into the comments. Carlos throwing in his 2 cents, which we appreciate. I would take him, to be honest, just for the experience, and it's a big bat. In case of emergency, break glass, LOL. Last night proved he can hit a breaking ball, which is all 100% true. And to your point from earlier, it was not a hanger. He readjusted. If you go back and you watch that swing, you can see him almost – he almost took his pre-stride, and then you can see him shift his weight back and then explode on it. And it was an unbelievable way to hit a very, very, very good breaking ball. Again, I know they're a bad team, and I know they don't have a good bullpen, but Edwards Jr. isn't a bad pitcher by any stretch, and he's having a good year. And that breaking ball, that curveball is a massive weapon for him throughout his career, and especially this season. So I'm with you guys, and anybody else who wants to throw those comments in, I want to hear what you guys think about Alvarez potentially being on the roster in the playoffs for at least round one. Maybe I agree with you, and it's not reactionary.
No.
It's based on the fact that no one has taken the job of right-handed DH. No one. They went out and I don't want to old news this. I don't want to go back in the time capsule and talk about the trade deadline. I don't want to do that. The Mets went out and they did the best trade deadline that they saw they possibly could, and they acquired basically 2 players to be 1 player. They acquired Ruff and Vogelback to be their DH against righties and lefties, and they thought they were getting a competent DH out of those 2 players. Well, only half of it worked out. Vogelback worked out. Ruff obviously has been abysmal. He's done nothing to prove that he can be on the playoff roster, so you can't go there. For the longest time, even if he showed some signs, I would have been like, you know what? Put Ruff on the roster. If he had started to come out, I know he had that abysmal stretch where he was like 0 for 35 or whatever. Yeah. If he would have, even in the last 2 series, shown something because the Mets had nowhere else to go and he would have gotten a few hits, and I would have said, you know what? Maybe you go with the veteran here, at least in the first series. But he's shown nothing. Buck has lost all confidence in him. It was a bad move to go and acquire him in hindsight. It was a good move at the moment. It, made plenty of sense at the time, but it didn't work out. They brought up Vientos. Vientos hasn't really taken the bull by the horns. He's had some good at-bats, but he looks a little bit overmatched. With Alvarez, I just think you need to go for the potential. And I said this on the goddamn Jets podcast when we were talking about the draft, heading into this past draft. The reason why I bring it up is, the Jets were a team heading into this season that I said the Jets have a lot of holes, but also a lot of young talent. But because they have a lot of holes all over the roster, I said, just give me, with 4 and 10, just give me the best athletes at the best positions. Give me blue chip players. Give me unbelievable, can't miss type of prospects. Don't reach for a position of need. Don't fill a position where you think, you've got a guy, but you don't want to, I think I maybe can do better. And they went out and they get Sauce Gardner and they get Garrett Wilson, and look how good those 2 players have been, especially Sauce. So the reason why I bring up this football analogy is because, to me, that's Alvarez. Alvarez is the number 1 prospect in baseball. So I will roll the dice, considering no one has taken the reins here for the right-handed DH spot. I will roll the dice on talent every time. Alvarez is talented, and he's Sauce Gardner. He's that good of a young player. So roll the dice on talent, and then come what may. Also, he provides something that no one else, like you said, besides Pete, provides on this team, which is the ability to change a game with one swing from the right-hand side. Now, look, Escobar has had a huge resurgence since he came off the IL. He's been excellent through the end of August and all of September. Kudos to him for really turning it on when it mattered, putting the team on his back. Mark Canha had that great run, where he was super clutch, and I love Canha, but he's not really a home run hitter. He's a gap-to-gap hitter that can run into one every once in a while. So when you factor in those two guys, you don't have anybody else from the right side. Lindor obviously is another switch hitter, and he's giving you a lot of pop for a shortstop. But Alvarez to me has 30, 35 home run potential over the course of a whole season. Yes. So I think you just roll the dice on him. You insert him into the lineup. You still go with Vogelback against the righty. I have no beef with that. Vogelback's been a good Met. He's probably going to be on the team next year in some way, shape, or form because he's under contract. So I don't think he's done anything to work his way off the team. But I think that Alvarez, in a short sample size, and maybe because other guys haven't done enough, but I think Alvarez deserves it. And James McCann is an out. He's an automatic out.
He's an automatic out. There's no point. I'm telling you, I don't know if they're going to have the stones to keep McCann off the roster, because I don't think that they would be willing to have Nito, and then even though Alvarez would be acting as the DH against lefties, having him as the 2, God forbid something happens to Nito, I don't think they have the balls to do it. So people then will say, oh, you're going to carry three catchers. It's like, well, it's more so I'm carrying Alvarez as a DH because I'm only going to have him hit. But if we're being honest, and, this team for the most part has been honest with itself for the entire year, minus, the constant running out of Darren Ruff, they've put people in the right spots to succeed, and the ones that aren't happening, they cut bait and then they move on. Like I said, outside of Ruff, but in this spot, Alvarez needs to be here based off of the power alone. That's it. Because of his power, because it answers what we've been saying since the offseason, how this team needed a little bit more power outside of Pete. Well, we didn't get it the way we thought we would get it. So you call up the number 1 prospect who has all the power in the world from a catcher standpoint, and you hope that he can spark you in some sense. And maybe last night was the start of something. Again, not a savior, but a proper presence to have at the bottom half of your lineup.
I agree. James Dowling says Alvarez will give you just as much as McCann offensively. And I agree with that in the sense that the floor is going to be no worse. So even if, to your point, Alvarez has shown that he's a guy who needs some time to adjust, right? And maybe there is going to be a little bit of a growing pains with Alvarez, and you don't want to see that necessarily in the playoffs. Of course, you want to put your best foot forward. But again, I don't know if right now the Mets have a better option. And I don't see it. I honestly don't see a way you can keep Alvarez off this roster. Carlos brings up a good point. He says, would you take both Alvarez and Vientos? Am I being too harsh on Ruff by preferring Vientos to him?
Not at all.
I don't think he's being too harsh.
Not at all.
But here's the thing. I don't think the Mets are going to take Alvarez and Vientos. I think they'll take Alvarez and Ruff. I do. I think that'll be the way that it goes, because they've shown Buck has shown an unwillingness to play Vientos in the field at all. Whereas he trusts Ruff at first base and kind of sort of in the outfield, left or right field in a pinch. I don't think he's going to be playing out there in any meaningful way, but I think they're a little afraid to put Vientos in the field, especially in a playoff scenario. So I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they can carry Alvarez and Vientos, knowing that Vientos hasn't shown that much offensively. Look, if Vientos was hitting 330 over the course of the time that he's been here, I think there's a chance it's Alvarez and Vientos. But right now, I think they're going to go with Darren Ruff. What do you think?
I think that you're only getting one of the two. I think you're getting Alvarez or Vientos, and I think it's going to be Alvarez. And if Ruff is healthy and everything's okay with him now, I think that they would opt for the veteran over another rookie. And to your point, when it comes to the unwillingness to put Vientos in a spot in the field, whereas Ruff can provide, halfway decent defense if he is put out into the field, whether it is at first base in a pinch or in the outfield in a pinch, whatever it may be. I think you're more likely to see only one of the two rookies, and I lean heavily towards that rookie being Alvarez.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that. I just think that's the thought process that they're showing.
Yes, right.
For me, I think you're in a tough spot if Ruff has to play the field anyway. So to me, if I were making the decisions, I've seen nothing from Darren Ruff. I would probably have Alvarez and Vientos on the team. That's probably what I would do. Because I think if you've gotten down to a situation where either Vientos or Ruff has to play the field, that means something has happened that sucks, right?
Yes.
And so you're going to be in a pinch, and you're probably then going to have to make a roster move, IL somebody, so things are going to happen if one of those guys is playing the field. We're not talking about a situation where the Mets are pressed into playing Wilmer Flores at shortstop in the World Series, right? Yeah. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a situation where, if either one of them see the field, for me, I think that's problematic. So I would go with the kids, because I would just go with, Vientos hasn't shown much, but he's shown more to me than Darren Ruff. A couple more comments coming in. Stevie Mac says they're still trying so hard to justify having McCann on this team. LOL. They are. Look, I think defensively, McCann is fine. I think he's an above average defensive player, but I think so is Nito. And I think we're going to have to deal with it just for the end of this season. I said it at the beginning of the second half. I think with Alvarez now being called up, there's no reason why Alvarez isn't the starting catcher next year. Knowing that you have Nito on the roster, and knowing that if Alvarez stumbles out of the gate, you hate to see top shelf prospects go back down to the minors, and I'm not forecasting that, but even Keith Hernandez went back to the minors. Guys get sent down. So I think the Mets are just fine rolling with Alvarez, having Nito as the backup. Look, Nito is as good as James McCann, and he makes a percentage of the money. So to me, I would try to get out from under that contract in the offseason. That is a conversation for a different day. But to me, I think you're going to see Alvarez, as the starting catcher next year. And hopefully he takes his job and runs with it. And hopefully, as far as the DH is concerned, and I hope it happens. I hope that Alvarez is on this team. We'll probably find out tomorrow, I would imagine. Yeah. I'm hoping that that's the case. One thing that just came down, I saw it a little bit ago, but kudos to Stevie Mac for throwing it in. Givens activated, McGill placed on the IL. Givens will also start this game, so it looks like they're going to give him the opportunity to, get some burn right out of the gate. Yeah. Bodes well for Givens making the playoff roster. I know he was real bad when he started, but he turned it around in a big way. I have no beef with that. Also, get his feet wet right now. Start him in a game, guarantee that he'll come in. Also, put him in a game where there's, a fresh inning. Have him be the opener. Yeah. I have no beef with that. And Carlos said, it was coming, Stevie. McGill cannot pitch out of the bullpen. It is what it is. He'll bounce back next year. I was hoping that McGill would have been a weapon for us, Ibby.
Same here.
But it looks like it, was not meant to be. And that's fine. I think it's a phantom IL, by the way. I think he's fine.
Yeah, it's I think it was a spot where, when people were trying to figure out the names that were going to be in the bullpen for this 3-game set with San Diego, you're looking at it and saying, well, McGill was probably not going to be on it. You probably weren't going to see Nagosic. That was another one that probably wasn't going to be on there. And then people mentioned the idea of both Walker and Carrasco not being on and just loading up elsewhere, because you're going with the 3 starters and you're going to go with Jake, Max, and Bassett in terms of that. Before we get out of here, we're at the 58-minute mark. I got to ask you. It's been talked about. I'm curious on where your stance is on this, and then I'll fill in where mine is. When it comes to the rotation for this 3-game set against San Diego, where do you stand in terms of game 1, game 2? If they win game 1, what they could do in game 2? It's been a talking point amongst a lot of people. Where do you stand on specifically game 1? Where do you stand on game 1?
So it's tricky because especially in the playoffs, but just in sports, I'm a best foot forward person.
Right.
But this playoff, this wild card series does muddy the waters a little bit because you want to try to have your best available guys as much as possible for the second series. You don't want to look ahead. Right. You have to take it one game at a time.
Right.
But when you're in baseball playoffs, you have to look ahead a little bit. You know what I mean? I know I'm contradicting myself here, but You
I get what
have to
you're saying,
win to
though.
get there.
Yes.
But to me, Bassett is as good of a number 3 as there is in baseball right now. I think on a lot of teams, Bassett would be your number 2. The Mets happen to have an embarrassment of riches. The last series in Atlanta, notwithstanding, where all 3 of them lost. I understand that.
Right.
So I think if I were the Mets, I would probably start Bassett in game 1
Okay.
to go against Darvish, knowing that Darvish has been really good against the Mets, and seeing what Bassett has, knowing that if you win that game, you can go to either Scherzer or DeGrom in the next game, and that allows you to save one of them if you win the first 2 for the Dodger series. So
Right.
that's where my head is at. Going Bassett, let's just say they go Bassett and Scherzer.
Mhm.
They go Bassett and Scherzer and they win those games, you have DeGrom ready to face the Dodgers. And you can go back to Scherzer quicker than you would have before. So I think I might go that way, but you can make the case for just putting your 2 guys out there. And you don't want to be down. You don't want to be in a situation where you're going to lose a series not having pitched Max and Jake.
Right.
That's the negative. You don't want to, if the Mets lose the Bassett game, and then they lose the Scherzer game and they get swept, well, now you went through a playoff series and you didn't pitch DeGrom, and you're like, well, what the hell?
Right.
So that's the drawback. Everybody's going to criticize you there, but I don't know, Ibby. I think there's something to be said. It's because how good Bassett is. That's the thing for me.
Right.
It's because Bassett is basically a 2 that the Mets could even toy with that. And that's where I think I would go. I might change my mind tomorrow because I've been bouncing back and forth on this. Part of me says you go Scherzer, you go DeGrom, boom, out. But, then you've got Bassett lined up for game 1 against the Dodgers. And is that the matchup you want to go with? I don't know. So right now, gun to my head, I say you go Bassett, Scherzer, and if you need to go to a 3rd game, you go DeGrom there. That's, I think, what I would do right now. What do you think?
I'm of the mindset right now where I don't look. We might not know until after game 1 is done, whichever route they go with whoever they start. We might not know who's even throwing game 2 until somebody asks Buck in the presser afterwards, because maybe they are going to go based off of a win versus a loss. Like, I don't know. I right now I feel as though they're going to throw Max game 1 because of what you said. And it's the one thing that I'm very, I guess if there's one player on the Padres that bothers me, it's the guy who's on the mound for them in that first game. It's the fact that Yu Darvish has always handled the Mets, and the fact that he pitched against them for 14 innings this year and he gave up 1 run, and he basically really like toyed with the lineup and dominated it. So, the fact that they've had their chances against him, they weren't able to capitalize. I wonder if their thought process is, if we run Max out there to neutralize their lineup to give us more of an opportunity, I think that might be the way that they go. And if they win that game, I will not be shocked if they run out Bassett in game 2, knowing that they have Jake no matter what in a game 3 if they were to lose game 2, and then they would have Jake game 1 against the Dodgers if they were to get through. So that's kind of where I am. But to your point before, like, sometimes it's a little bit overthinking, and that might just be simply, look, these are our 2 horses. We have to win these games. We have to get through the next round. We'll figure out when we get there. And Max is going to go game 1 and Jake's going to go game 2. And another thing we have to worry about for is, I don't know if there was an update or anything when it comes to these blisters or whatever happened with him, if he's okay. So I don't know, but for some reason I'm feeling like we might get Max game 1, and then definitely if the Mets win game 1, seeing Bassett trotted out for game 2, knowing that either way you're set, because if you lose game 2, you got Jake, and if you win, you save Jake for the Dodger series.
Yeah, it's funny because I do feel like you and I are overthinking it a little bit. I do feel like there's a little bit of that classic, over managing here.
Yes.
But I just, for me, again, and I don't want to be the dead horse on this, but I just look at it where, to me, Bassett is the X factor. We talked about at the top of this show, and we talked about it 2 weeks ago, the Mets stars need to be the Mets stars. The Mets have 5 superstars: DeGrom, Scherzer, Alonso, Lindor, and Diaz. And they're going to go as far as those 5 take them. Just on the outside looking in of those 5 is Jeff McNeil and Chris Bassett for me. I don't think that they're lesser players or anything by any stretch. I mean, McNeil's probably going to win the batting title. Stevie Mack threw an update. Freeman is 2 for 2, needs 2 more hits to pass McNeil. It'll be interesting to see if he's ready to hop in the game to keep the batting lead. Since that comment came in, Freeman flew out in his 3rd at bat, so he basically needed to go 4 for 4 in order to pass him. So it looks like McNeil can enjoy his day off after that last out. Yeah, because he basically needed to go 4 for 4 to pass him. So, but that said, I think you're going to go as far as those 5 guys will take you. And again, just on the outside looking in are Bassett and McNeil. And I think they're going to play important parts. So if the Mets never made the Chris Bassett trade, right? The Mets tried to get Kevin Gausman. The Mets tried to bring back Syndergaard. The Mets tried to do all these different things to fill that 3rd spot in their rotation. Let's say they didn't do any of them, and the 3rd pitcher on this team was Taijuan Walker. I like Taijuan Walker. I think he's been a good Met, and I think he's got really good stuff, and I think he battles, and, every once in a while he throws up a clunker, but I think he's a good pitcher. But if he was your 3rd pitcher, or if Cookie Carrasco was your 3rd pitcher, I'm going Jake, I'm going Max in some combo, and I'm saying, agreed. This is what we're doing. Yes. You've got to run these guys out there. Because then at that point, you really, truly are looking at the Diamondbacks rotation from when they won the World Series. It was Johnson and Schilling. Their next best pitcher was Miguel Batista, who was fine, but you're talking about a significant drop-off. You've got 2 Hall of Famers and then, Miguel Batista. And I'm not saying Bassett is a Hall of Famer by any stretch, but with Jake and Max, 2 Hall of Fame caliber pitchers at the top, Bassett is closer to those guys than Miguel Batista was to the other 2. In terms of ability. Bassett's been a really good pitcher his entire career. So for me, he's the swing guy. He's the X factor guy. And that's why we can even have this conversation. Because if it was one of the other guys, I'm not even entertaining.
You're not entertained. No, not at all. Not at all.
So that to me is the big difference there. I do want to shout out Mark Healy, who's a great guest at the Queens Baseball Convention. And he does a lot for the Mets, writes for I forgot what it's called, Gotham Sports, I think.
Yes. Gotham Sports.
He posted the Mets lineup for their last postseason game, which was the 1-game playoff
2016
in 2016. Now, I remember the game. Of course, we all remember the game.
Remember the fucking ending.
Okay, but I just want to throw this out there. I said we weren't going to do this, Ibby, in the second half, but we talked a lot in the first half about how whatever happens here, things are different, right?
Yes.
Things are different with the Mets because of Steve Cohen and all this stuff. This is the lineup. The last time the Mets played a must-win single-game elimination playoff game.
Hit me with it.
Jose Reyes, 3rd base. Right away. Fuck. Right away. They had to bring Jose Reyes back off the fucking scrap heap because they couldn't find anybody who could play 3rd base.
Right. Okay.
Jose Reyes, the ghost of Jose Reyes, playing 3rd base, leading off. Asdrubal Cabrera, shortstop. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yoenis Cespedes, left field.
Okay.
Curtis Granderson, center field.
Okay.
Batting fifth, playing 2nd base in a must-win elimination playoff game, TJ Rivera.
That's solid.
I could stop there, but I'm not going to.
Go ahead, pour it on.
Playing right field, Jay Bruce.
Okay.
Batting 7th, catching, Rene Rivera.
Okay.
Batting 8th, playing 1st base. Hard to remember this guy was even a Met. James Loney. With Noah Syndergaard on the mound batting 9th. Now, to Syndergaard's credit, pitched his ass off, went blow for blow with Madison Bumgarner, and that lineup went blow for blow. They gave it everything they had. And that was a good game where the Mets came up just short, okay? But when you line up that group of players versus the lineup the Mets are going to run out here starting on Friday, even with Starling Marte probably not available and probably not on the roster to start the playoffs, you're going to look at a lineup that features Brandon Nimmo, Lindor, McNeil, Alonso, Vogelback. Like, you're just Canna, Escobar. You're looking at a much better team,
yes, 1
through 9, than the last time we played a game we absolutely had to win. So, Mets fans, exhale a little bit, because that lineup is disgusting. James Loney is playing first base. They got two. Realistically, there are two guys off the scrap heap that were playing meaningful innings in Jose Reyes and James Loney. Two guys who, at one point in their career were very good, above average major league players.
Yeah.
Were well past their prime. I guess you can even add Jay Bruce into the mix with that.
Right.
Curtis Granderson should not be hitting fourth. Curtis Granderson was a really good Met, but he should not be hitting fourth. And then you look at, Rene Rivera and TJ Rivera, spare parts players. Spare parts. The Mets do not have any spare parts players in their starting 9. Now, they do have some underachieving players like, you want to look at Nito or McCann or something like that. Right. But I would still rather have McCann in the lineup than Rene Rivera. If you make me pick, gun to my head, hey, John, how would you want James McCann starting a game in the playoffs? Well, at least he's not Rene Rivera would be my answer to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's clearly a new day, if you will, in terms of what the lineup was the last time we were in this position. And obviously, it's a much better position now, because now it's a 3-game set as opposed to just a sudden death type of game. So I am happy in that sense, not having, if we had to be a 100+ win team in a do or die situation in order to move on. I always thought that was stupid. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a fun time, and I think it's time that people, like we talked about at the beginning, wipe off the frustrations, let it go. It's on to the next. It's trying to win these games. That's it. This is playoff baseball. You're going to be hanging on every pitch. You're going to be chock full of anxiety. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be sweating. You're going to be drinking. You're going to, whatever it is that you do, okay? It's going to be all those things, all right? This is what you've wanted, okay? This is what you want. And the one point that I wanted to make was, I hope that, and Seth Lugo kind of alluded to this when he was, showing his confidence, saying that, he thinks that the Mets are a better team than the Braves, and he hopes that they get another crack at them. And I appreciate a player who says something like that. But I look at this and I go, this team got their shit kicked in at an almost pretty much an embarrassing level on the road against a world champion team, defending a world champion team. Now, that happens. Playoffs are around the corner. Now this is your opportunity to go back to what Stevie Mack was saying. You have this road where you got to beat these potential top flight teams to prove your worth. When the bright lights were on, this team failed. Okay. Now they have to take this tougher road. I hope, and I'm confident, especially in this first series, obviously, since it's one series at a time, I'm hopeful that this team takes that as a learning experience and says, I never want to feel that way again. I never want to go out there and put on a display that makes this team look as if 100 wins was lucked into. This is a team that busted their ass all year, wins 100 games, is going to now have to go out and prove it again that we're here for a reason. We know what you think of us, and now we got to change your mind. That's your motivation, because the last thing you want is the LOL Mets narrative to return in full force with an early exit. It's one series at a time. It's one game at a time. You have a big, tall task in front of you, and Yu Darvish, a good way to start things off is to handle a guy that has handled you for the most part over the last couple of years. And it starts on game 1, starts on Friday. Is it going to be a blackout? I don't even know. Do we know?
I don't know. They haven't said it, I don't think.
But either way, place should be packed. Place is going to be hot. Citi Field during the playoffs is next level. It's a place where I love to be. I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to get out there this year, but we'll see what happens. But the place is going to be rocking, and playoff baseball, baby. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Listen, man, you said it really well. I agree with you. And, in a way, the Mets are in a unique position because, I've said all year, and I stand by this, no team lucks into 100 wins. You don't accidentally win 100 wins. It's too many wins. It's too many wins to happen by accident, to happen by luck. But the Mets are in a unique position where they're a 100-win team with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove. That usually doesn't happen either. Right. You don't usually get to that level. You get to 100 wins, you're like, oh, well, target on my back. There are seasons where, I said it in 2006, no team won 100 games. The Mets and the Yankees have the best record in baseball, 97 wins. So there are times where no one wins 100. The right. Mets are going to have won 100, and if they win 101, they're going to just at best tie for the third best record in baseball this year. So this is a year where multiple teams have won 100 games. There's a lot of excellent teams, and so the Mets at 100 wins, maybe 101 wins, are going to say, we got something, we got to go. We got something to prove right here, right now. And to me, give me a team that is good enough to win 100 games, but hungry enough to go and get something else because nothing's been handed to them. So I think the Mets are in a good enough position. We have to get out of here, Ibby. We're at hour 16, but before we do, look, when we record this podcast next time, the Mets are either going to be still playing or they're not.
Right.
So I want to know what you think is going to happen by the time we record next week.
By the time we record next week,
yeah,
our New York Metropolitans will still be playing.
Okay.
They will still be playing baseball.
I agree with you. I think we will be talking about a Mets-Dodgers series next week.
I believe so.
To do this.
This is not ending in the wild card. No shot.
No. I think the Mets are too good. The Mets have too many good players. And I don't see them going quietly into that good night. I don't see it. I think the Mets will be here facing off against the Dodgers in the next round of the playoffs. Ibby, this has been a blast. Thank you for dealing with my schedule. We'll do something weird next week when I'm also here doing this. So
we'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Guys, thanks for watching live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We appreciate all the comments from Carlos and Stevie Mac and David and James and everybody else. Can't get to everybody, but we appreciate you guys tuning in live. Appreciate you guys watching. We will be back with you next week. And of course, if you missed any of it, you can check the replay as soon as we end this broadcast. And of course, you can listen to us, the audio version of this podcast, starting tomorrow, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace.